of forming a culture in a human group to survive and thrive has been going on for a long, long time. One of the most fascinating things about the work that Anthony's done for years and more recently with Giles is its range from the tribesmen of Papua New Guinea to Maasai warriors to bankers in London to the steppes of Mongolia and even in Ann Arbor, Michigan, lots of different places around the world that give us a real perspective on how basic this process of building a culture is to any human tribe. So delighted to have you guys with us, and want to turn things over to you now to give us a world tour, so that we better understand just how fundamental this all is to our survival. Thanks. Great to have you with us.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. It's an honor to be with you. And it's great to introduce Giles over there. And my business partner, as well, is Dowson Brutolf, who is in Rwanda at this moment, who is from Holland. We're working together on really looking at the universality of culture. And I have to say, listening to all the comments today, I just find staggeringly exciting. I really do. And I'd love to show you some slides about this adventure. But really, it's about tribes and territory and adventure. But today, just listening to what Dan and the other speakers have been saying, as structure, stability, security, certainty, they're proven to be delusions of an ill-informed mind. And I just think today is the opportunity to really lead, but to lead with humanity, lead with humility. And Dan has been a magnificent inspiration for me. And I'd love to just show you. Here is Dan with Sir Joseph Nombre, a Papua New Guinea ambassador, working with him, a tribal chief. And when Dan asked him, how do you choose your leaders? He just said, we look at who people follow. And it's just this natural wisdom of here's Dan with Chief Buthelezi, who was instrumental in getting Mandela out of prison. These are big men who have earned the respect and the humility and the humanity. And I don't think anybody represents that more than Dan himself, and how he builds his teams together. And that's why the Denison brand, the culture, and everything Dan does is way out there in front. And also it's because, of course, Dan has got a map and he knows exactly where he's going. So, Dan, you've been a magnificent inspiration. And I always remember back in Tokyo when I said, have you done anything with tribes? And you said, no, but I'd love to. And that's really had my way of thinking over the years. And I hope you'll see how this odyssey over the last 25 years has really come together. And why I love the idea of the indigenous people is they have clarity, trust, and adaptability. And in this case, it was very lucky because I'm lying between those two horsemen. And as you can see, they're getting very, very, very close to me. And that is not a telephoto lens. And that is how close the horseman actually got to me. So that is sort of really why I sort of spend my time. What we're talking about today is not academic. It is from people who have kindly invited me into their cultures, around their fires, and have been willing to invite me into their huts and their homes to share their wisdom. And whether I'm in Africa or Mongolia, it is this incredible sense of pride, this sense of identity, that the storms come in, the storms go, but they have this ability to adapt that's been built up for thousands of years around a core set of values based on wisdom. And that has been my mission, is to bring this indigenous wisdom to organizations, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in England. And yes, it's around how do you make decisions, but fundamentally it is about that leadership is humility, leadership is humanity, leadership is bringing people together and being a great community builder. Here is Dan with Chief Buthelezi, or with a chief in there, or with Christo Brand, Nelson Mandela's prison guard. These are all incredibly humble people. And I think it's time we went back to realize our arrogance of ownership It's not, it's who we really are. And we need to put that record button on life on and realize what a wonderful adventure and gift we have. Just to give you an idea, these are some of the companies that I've worked with over the years. We're doing a lot of work with education through Giles's connections, etc. My own story as a small boy brought up in Africa, in the Sudan and in Egypt. And then when I was 22, I had had enough of England. I got a one-way ticket in search of adventure, opportunities, passion, and purpose. And that's what I'm still on. I'm 70, 71 next year, off for a 71-day odyssey in Mongolia. I think we have to continue to realize that we are on a journey, and every day we can learn and benefit from it. And it was on this camel safari in northern Kenya. And that's when I first saw the Maasai. And what I saw there were people who had absolute substance without any arrogance. And I realized my entire education was, how could you be massively arrogant with minimum substance? And my school went on to teach effortless insincerity. But I became fascinated. Why aren't we taught this? Why aren't we taught presence and identity? And I went to meet the Papua New Guinea ambassador in Tokyo. And I said, what is it, sir, you've got that we've lost? He said, I don't know. Why didn't you go to my village? So there I am in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, asking about what is important in your life. And I started to learn that a big man has many feathers, but a bigger man can hand out his feathers, and how you have to earn your spear. You can't buy it, you can't sell it, you can't give it away. And I ask you, you've probably never thought of it, but do you know people who hand out their feathers? Do you hand out your feathers, or do you try and keep them all? Do you know people who haven't earned the spear, who've tried to buy it? And I think these are inherent in all of us, of culture. And the role of leadership is really to help people, whether you're in Africa, earn your spear, or in Papua New Guinea. The essence of contribution is the same. When I got back to Tokyo, I said to the ambassador, what is the single most important thing in your life? And he said, it is my territory. Therefore, I know my duty and I know my aims and ambitions. And because of that, my culture is based inherently because I know who I am, because I know how I contribute. That is my identity. And this is Dan in my garden in England, talking to Sir Joseph, doing the survey with him, looking at what are the priorities of their culture in Papua New Guinea, and really learning what has changed and what hasn't. And Dan can talk about the survey and the survey results. But for me, I thought, really, what is my territory? And I thought it was time maybe to go and explore my own potential. So I was invited to climb a 7,000-meter mountain in Western China. And to practice, I went off to climb Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya in Africa, and also Mount Stanley in the Ruwenzori. And I thought, wow, if I can climb these mountains, what I need to do is to unlock in people trust and willpower. If we unlock trust and willpower, we will be successful. So I set up a company called I Will Not Complain, because complainers destroy morale. Complainers are cowards. Complainers undermine the authority of anybody. But we must make observations, but we must not complain. But what I then moved on from Japan was also to China. And Dan has been with me on many events on the Great Wall of China. But I wanted to use it as a metaphor to get people to think about their barriers, to think about how you earn trust and how you get people to see what it is. And this is working with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett on the Great Wall, building teamworks and realizing that you can create a team actually quite easily. But everybody kept saying to me, where do I fit in? Where do I belong? Where am I recognized? What is my identity? And I thought, well, trust isn't enough. You need something more. And that's when I started to realize that in Papua New Guinea and everywhere else, indigenous people had a map. So I thought maybe everybody needs trust, but they also need a map. And that's what I've been working on for the last 20 years. Because what I've discovered in Papua New Guinea or any other place in the world, you can ask people, where are they fishing? Where are they hunting? Where are they farming? But you can give executives of Thomson Reuters a map, a blank sheet of paper, and say, what is your territory? Where is your village? Where are you farming? And once you ask people this, they will then draw you a map and they will tell you the story of what are they actually trying to do. And this is the problem today, is people cannot have context of what they're trying to do. So with some pens, some blank paper, and a question of what is your territory? What is your wealth? Are you looking after your customers? It's universal, because inside everybody there is this map. This is ability to say, this is where I am. This is the clarity. And once I have this clarity, I can work out where I'm going. And that builds the trust that we've been hearing about this afternoon, is so massively important. Without trust at the center, which is at every indigenous community. But the trouble is, in companies, you often get the head of it saying, I'm heading for paradise. Everything is brilliant. I'm wonderful, as you've seen on the Denison surveys. But what do the employees see? Bullshit bridge, fantasy applications. This is the reality. And forever since I met Dan, I've wanted to say, how can we work with the survey? How can we really, really show that this is actually indigenous wisdom? And this is the survey we did for Teleflorist on the Great Wall of China. When we went there, they had a clear goal. And we got them to draw their maps on the ramparts of the wall, thinking about their barriers, thinking about the challenges, communicating, talking to each other, walking the wall, sharing a vision together. And it went from that to this. This is what the survey looked like, because they started to trust and they knew what they're meant to be doing, because they had a map. And that's why I think this map is so important, because it provides context for conversation. In that group, there are 24 people, 16 different nationalities. It gets across diversity and inclusion. Everybody's map is relevant. It creates a common language of the issues. People can start to work out solutions and what they can do to solve it. So this is on our training centers on the Great Wall, bringing clarity together. Because once people can identify what they're trying to do, they can create a business plan that everybody can actually understand. Everybody has that same language of where am I, who am I, what am I protecting, where am I going? And even working with the Gates Foundation, they drew a map. How do we work out to raise Africa? What is a plan that is so big? And they came up with the idea of how do we mobilize resources from China for global polio eradication? Because once you've got a map, you've got something that people can actually work out what they're doing. But what I realized since COVID started is a map is not really enough, because the terrain has changed. This is a map drawn by someone in the education business. Everybody fighting each other, nobody wanting to do anything. This is 15 months ago. Even within 2 months, some of the restrictions, Ofsted, we could start to try new ideas. Education could change. And this is a map drawn by the same person 2 months ago. The leadership, the governance, the teaching. Everybody needs a new map to think about where they're going. But whether you have the map drawn by a council in Scotland, I think the greatest leadership challenge of the future will be the ability to build trusting, sustainable communities. That is what I think the future is. It's always been with us. Leadership, everybody in the community has got to feel that they are responsible and that they are a leader. And this is what we've now been working on with the Maasai, with Aboriginals in Australia, to look at what is a model that works. It is around the hard knowledge, the visible leadership, the community and the culture, and the invisible leadership with trust at the center, that absolute core essence of trust. And what does that community look like? And that's really what we've finally done after all of these years. We now know how we can really, really, really promote your vision, your humility, and your humanity. starting on the journey of what is the community like. And then you start to ask people about the hard knowledge. Everybody has to know it and agree it. What is the territory? What are your threats? Once you can do that, then you can start to get people to think about growth. What are we going to hunt? What are we going to protect? And how are we going to hand out our feathers? Who needs our wisdom? And then once you can agree this, you can start to look at where do we innovate? Where do we focus? And this is done through a set of different templates that we have. Because as we've been hearing this afternoon, people need a migration plan. They need to move from A to B. But far, far more important than that, they need invisible leadership. And this is what we have taught by indigenous people from Australia, from Africa. How do you get people to lead by example with the humility and humanity? How do you train people to hand out their feathers? And that is to get people to think about the collective first. What does that really mean to build the culture? Because it's the identity, the purpose, and the values. But I believe that you actually need the context of knowing every part of that wheel. And that is what I believe we can do. That is what Dennison does. So Dan, thank you. 25 years ago, when we met in Tokyo, you said there's got to be a way that we can bring the wisdom of the indigenous people into your map and into your methodology. So with that, I'd like to thank you very, very much for listening to us, sort of the passion that there's got to be a way that focuses on the humility of people to look at life differently. And now is the opportunity. But thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Anthony, for another round of inspiration. This has been going on for quite a while here, and every time I learn something new. And it's a great contribution to our forum, and really terrific to have you and Giles here. And Giles can give examples of how you've used this with some client organizations. We've done this we have our own map in Dennison Consulting, and it's probably time we do it again, because we always learn a lot about our identity, who we are, what our purpose is, what our territory is, and how we're going to cross the river and head into the future. So let's turn things to Giles and get sort of your perspective on how you've used this with some of the organizations you work with.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Good afternoon, Dan, and good afternoon, attendees. I'm Giles Jackson. I've been working with Anthony for the past year, and we connected through mutual friends in Virginia. And I've been fascinated with territory mapping. I think, having taught been a professor for almost 3 decades, I think it's really injected new life into my teaching, and also into the lives of the students and our clients. It really has been revolutionary, and I'm really standing on the shoulders of giants here, is taking the knowledge that has been built up over decades and trying in my own small way to apply it to make a difference in my community. So I'm calling this Territory Mapping, the Adventure Continues, and I'm glad we showed a picture of Dan and his Formula One car, because I believe we're going to need some Formula One energy to get through my slides. So I'll just go the best I can, and apologies if it's a bit fast. So yes, I'm professor of stakeholder capitalism at Shenandoah University. My background, a PhD 30 years ago from Virginia Tech in sustainable development. I'm also professor in residence at the Nomadic School of Business. So as I said, Anthony and I have worked together for some months, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So what I'm going to do is sort of divide this into 2 sections. The first section is I'm going to talk about some work with some external clients. And then secondly, I'm going to show you some student maps and how mapping has really, provided that context and clarity and direction and inspiration for students really to do some amazing things. So just given an example, one of the things that Anthony talked about was the ability of maps to create context. to create a shared reality. And so much of the time we're walking around with different versions of reality in our heads. And of course, the whole idea of organizations is to create synergy, but you can't create synergy unless we somehow meet in the middle and create some shared understanding of reality. So one of our clients last year, very interesting case study, this is Winchester Regional Airport, and they've been trying to raise just over $1 million to build a new terminal building. And really the organization is at an inflection point. And so what we did with help of Anthony is we sort of parachuted in here, and we got the senior leadership and board of directors to draw maps. On the left-hand side, you can see a map from the executive director, Nick Sabo, which is a description of the current reality, the strategic inflection point. On the right-hand side, David Foley, who's the operations supervisor. So David's been in the organization for 15 years, whereas Nick only joined literally within the last year. Two different ways of looking at the same problem, and yet a lot of areas of overlap. So just to start with David's map, he has the Winchester Regional Airport Authority in the middle, and these green points here are basically the different jurisdictions that they serve. Around this territory here are the different stakeholders. So you've got the FAA, you've got the equivalent in Virginia, you've got all the county governments, you've got the Economic Development Commission, you've got business, you've got wealthy individuals, you've got public services like hospitals, which rely on airport services. You have individual clients who lease space or who have aircraft at the airport. And then you have the history, which is sort of his 15 years working with the organization. And the interesting thing about this is how David looks at the relationships between these different stakeholders and is tried to characterize them or calibrate them with these in-out arrows. So the arrows indicate the amount of energy going out versus the amount of energy coming in. So here he feels, for example, with these, it's a pretty equal relationship in terms of what they get from the county governments and what they give back. Whereas in the case, and in the case of business, it's also a fairly equal two-way street. Whereas in some other cases, the relationship may not look quite so balanced. You can also see up here that the piggy bank from county funding or government funding is in danger of being cut. And you can see here there's scissors cutting the string. Over on the left-hand side, the way that Nick characterizes the situation is, hopefully you can see this, there's a small plane on the runway, and what he's basically saying is that the airport as an enterprise is out of the safety of the hangar, is on the runway. They haven't yet taken off with this new $1.2 million terminal. They're assessing the various risks and rewards of action. They've got threats such as COVID, but they've got this vision of hope. And what they're hoping is to take off, and they've got to figure out how to navigate and fly and which port to land in. There's a land of opportunity over here, but at the same time, they have their competitors, some of which have palm trees, which indicates that they are flush with cash. And whereas the airport is not out of the woods. So what is the value of this exercise? You know, by having Nick, David, and other people come together, we get them around a big seminar table, and we start to have a big discussion about the maps. Who was on the map? Who wasn't on the map? What are the major themes in your map? What are the things that are in your thinking that you want to be addressed? And it's a way, you know, at a time when on the one hand, we're encouraged just to hurtle forward with implementation of our plans. It's really a way of saying, let's freeze this for a moment. Let's just take stock. Let's stand back and really, really listen to what everybody has to say. And out of that, eventually, we can reach some kind of a consensus on the current reality. This was another map that was done actually by a team of my MBA students for Sela Health. It's Africa's largest telemedicine platform. And the logic behind this is simply that, you know, that something like 1 out of every 10,000 people in Africa have access to a physician. So in order to address that deficit, we're using technology with algorithms, natural language processing, where people can have many of their medical issues resolved using technology. And what these students did is they looked at the current reality of Sela Health up here, and they imagined several pathways to bring them into a stronger future, into a bigger, more established business in the future, in the years to come. And the one in the middle that I highlight here is the Yellow Brick Road, which is a partnership with GlaxoSmithKline, which they felt that by forging this partnership with a big pharma company, that would really provide the foundation they needed to really grow and flourish in the future. This one here is a couple of maps I'm going to show you from a project, a mapping session that Anthony and I did with the University of Virginia in a specific department of Middle Eastern and Southeast Asian languages. And what was really interesting about this is that it wasn't just the faculty involved, it was all the staff as well, including the administrative assistants. And the faculty were kind of in awe as one of the assistants was presenting her map here and really mapping out the flows in the department of resources, of information, of ideas, and where the barriers were and what the issues were. And the faculty sort of said afterwards, wow, we didn't know that's the way this department worked, because everybody works in their own silos, and all of a sudden there's this very, very explicit and simple way of making sense, really, of how the department works. This is from an actual faculty member's point of view, which is really fascinating. This faculty member characterized the UVA as really as a tree with many branches. And the feeling was the university administration is spending a disproportionate amount of time and energy on one particular cluster of branches up on the northwest side up here. And the feeling was that their department really was not being given the resources and attention it deserved. They were having to prop it up with some various measures, and there were potential lightning strikes and other issues that everybody felt rather nervous about. So again, not all the faculty members are aware of how the other faculty members feel. And for them, it was very educational to listen to their colleagues and say, wow, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of the world that way. Let's talk about that some more. So the mapping then becomes a vehicle, really, as Anthony said, a context for conversation, a way to really understand where people and to empathize where they're coming from, and hopefully then move forward with a deeper understanding of where we all are in the process. So trying to relate this back to the Denison approach here, which I'm kind of a new convert here and trying to learn everything I can. It seems that either stated or implied in the maps, we have these same issues. There are the issues of, do we have a clear shared external vision, or are we in a fog? Are we really truly adaptive, and can we maintain this customer focus and adapt around it? Or are we kind of rigid and hidebound by bureaucracy on the internal side? Is there a sense of continuity and consistency, or do we have the opposite? Is there a sense of involvement from all people across departments, or do some departments or people within departments feel somewhat alienated? So I've just got a couple more minutes here. I want to just share with you some really just hot off the press, so to speak, some of the student venture maps, which I'm really proud to be able to show you. So some of my students in business class, it's sort of a cross between branding and entrepreneurship, have come up with some really amazing ideas. This one from Abby Payne is actually for a subscription box that people would receive through the mail every month with eco-friendly goods in it. And here she is at the bottom, trying to think, what direction do I go in? Where are the rivers I should be crossing? Who are the types of brands that I need to partner with to include in the box? And what are the different ways in which we're going to promote it? How am I going to build my team? This one is from Isaac Schrantz. He wants to start up a consulting and marketing firm in Denver, Colorado. You can see a picture of Denver here. And here he really maps out the 5-year evolution, as he sees it, of the consulting firm. And he ends up really identifying 3 issues, all of which will relate very nicely back to the Denison framework. Number 1, there's a fear that we won't have enough value proposition. And maybe we need to bring in more partners to deliver. There's a fear that we there's a breakdown in communications between ourselves and our clients, which is an external issue. Well, maybe we should establish HR positions to check in, to grow relationships and ensure transparency. He's also concerned, because we've looked a lot at ethical failings of individuals and organizations in business by reading the Financial Times, etc. He's worried about ethical lapses and how do we maintain ethical standards, and has a recommendation for that. Do I have any more time, Dan?
Sure, Giles. You have another 4 or 5 minutes to be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
This one is from Emily Smiley. She came up with the idea of smart plastics, which would be a machine that people would have at home where they could literally put in recyclable bottles and produce things like forks and plates from it. And this is her very interesting vision that she has tried to map out. And we've tried to tie in principles from this rather excellent book called A New Brand World that was published 20 years ago. Nice little print handbook by the former marketing director of Nike and Starbucks. This one is Drew Cactus, who wants to start a maintenance business, and it's really a progression of year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and how he wants to grow this seed into a flourishing plant by literally reinvesting the profits into the business and building up this business so that by year 5, he really is a well-established maintenance business in the DMV region. This one, interestingly, John Swope is inheriting a construction company from his father who established it 20 years ago. And again, it's sort of like a very simplified model, but currently FMS Construction is a subcontractor. So they'll go and build like gas stations and they'll just do the framing and the demolition and the renovation. And what John wants to do is inherit the business and actually add other services such as electricians and plumbers and things of that nature to make it more of a turnkey type service. He also wants to diversify into electric car charging stations and develop a specialty in that, given the infrastructure build out that's going to happen in the next decades. This one, Jun Young Sim, very interesting student who wants to start a record label in Richmond, Virginia, to build up the music industry there for underground music. And this is his fascinating kind of career map for that. A couple more slides. Peyton Clary has actually started a real estate business with her partner, Sharon. And here, this map shows them navigating through the territory over the next few years to build it up to a multi-million-dollar commercial real estate business. And along the way, she talks about marketing and promotion. She talks about core values, and she talks about the swamp of negativity. That is, you're too young, it's too risky, this is too bold, or why don't you do something else for your career? Final slide is Natalia Kryl. Natalia is from Ukraine. She came to the US literally not knowing a word of English and with $50 in her pocket. And is really an amazing woman who now works at Starbucks. And here you can see her personal career map, that she wants to be a warrior and she wants to start a real estate firm. And she's going to law school. My final slide is, again, to reflect back on the student maps, some questions which are either stated or implied in the maps. First of all, what is our real mission, or what is my real mission? Secondly, how will we adapt and change in the future? Where will we must we stay consistent? And who do we include and who do we involve in this great journey? So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to share a few insights into how we've tried to bring mapping into the business curriculum, and I appreciate this very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Giles. And we appreciate it a lot too. Thanks for all of your examples with student projects and other organizations that you've worked with.
My pleasure.
Really interesting application of the territory mapping and of helping people get focused. I think we have a question or two from the participants. Nellie, do you want to pose a couple of those for Anthony and Giles? And then maybe I've got time for a question or so here before we wrap this one up.
Yeah,
Please, go ahead.
absolutely. What were some of the challenges or failures that taught you most regarding working with the tribal leadership? I suppose that's mostly directed at Anthony, but I'm sure that Giles could speak to that as well.
I'm not sure. I think we are all driven by the fear of failure and being told that we're going to amount to nothing, that we're the most stupid person on the planet. And it sort of drives one out of one's sort of, it isn't comfortable. So it's somewhere new. And I think what I've found is one is absolutely accepted by the people in the tribal lands. I've never had any problem. People have always welcomed me in. It's the natural heritage that we used to have. I think we've sort of forgotten how to be nice to people, how to be humble, how to be human, literally to be human. And I think this is what we can learn from the indigenous people, is that they will welcome us in. They will be nice to us. Giles has done a lot in South America with indigenous people there. And Dan's been with me with the Zulus in South Africa. And there is this warmth that is there. We just don't get that as a natural instinct in the West. But I've been to all 50 states and I've done 40,000 miles of hitchhiking. Nobody's ever been nasty to me. And everybody's always going to be nice to me. And I think this is the approach we've got to have today, that life is really to be enjoyed and people are going to be nice to you. Dan, I mean, you've been very nice to me. You've listened to me for 25 years.
But, if there's one lesson, I've learned many lessons from Anthony. The one is that if you express an interest in the wisdom that anyone has accumulated in their lives, in their village, in their organization, in their tribe, they are immediately much more welcoming, because that's what drives Anthony to kind of search the world for interesting examples. That's a curiosity about what have they learned that's helped them survive for so long, that we can benefit from that. And I think it's interesting. I mean, a good question, a lot of times people, kind of react to this with like a great, it's a great adventure. It's very inspiring, but, is this a practical approach? And, I've found it to be a highly practical approach. It sure was with the organization, with our own organizations and what. But some of the wisdom that the two of you have gained in how do you persuade contemporary business leaders of the importance of these messages and of these lessons to their own leadership journey? What have you learned about making that? Because you sure do make that connection really well, and I'm not sure that we all do it quite that well.
It's been a huge challenge, and I would say it is finally gradually getting a little bit easier, but this is definitely not for everybody. It honestly isn't. I mean, a lot of people spend their entire lives avoiding honesty, trust, and identity. And this is extremely frightening. Potentially a leader might learn something that they didn't actually know, and that can be really frightening for some people. And it takes courage, and I think now we need courage. I think never ever have we needed more courage, more humanity, and more humility. And that's what all the books are saying at the moment about being human. That's what your whole service is, your survey is about, and what you're about, I think. Giles, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so Chris Argyris said that in certain organizations, I think he called them System 1, not only are some things undiscussable, but their undiscussability is undiscussable.
Yes.
And I think that's an interesting one, because I think in mapping, you've got to be willing to give life or give space for the undiscussables. And so It's like a very black or white decision. You're either going to let it happen or you're not. There's no middle ground. You're either going to let it open up and give everyone in the organization an ability to express what they really think and feel, which ultimately is probably a good thing. But there's definitely a risk. And I think, yeah, as Anthony said, it's not for everybody. And I think it requires a fair amount of courage on the part of leaders to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think sorry, Dan.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think one thing I've found really, really, really amazing. I mean, as you know, I've sort of flown over to run sessions with you in America, etc. I have found it even more successful being able to do this sitting in my home in England with people. We had 180 people on 5 continents drawing maps and then putting them in small breakout rooms from literally every continent that didn't know each other, talking about the rivers, mountains, swamps, and deserts that they needed to address. And I think this is what I find so wonderful. It crosses every culture. It's totally diversity, inclusion, and really it is so much fun.
You know, I think that Giles' point that this is a really innovative, creative, and unique way to give space to the undiscussable. Because somehow when you're trying to get yourself organized to write this down in a map, in a graphic fashion, what you're supposed to not talk about and what you're supposed to talk about kind of gives way to trying to express the whole thing. And, you know, then you're quite right. I've been a part of this, you know, in my own organization, as well as doing territory mapping projects with other organizations. And there's this really fascinating moment where you realize that this is really terrifying, but I'm a part of it. And so are the others here. So maybe we can get over that and start to talk about what is, you know, what is so terrifying, and maybe what's so exciting about this. And maybe if we get ourselves focused and we, you know, charge this hill together, that we can actually make it up to the top.
And it is exciting because one never knows what one's going to see, as you know, Giles.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Natalia was saying, so I give oral exams at the end of the class, and Natalia had her slot this morning, and she was saying that, you know, faced with this blank piece of paper, I really had no idea what I was going to do. But once you make that first stroke,
yeah,
it's like my subconscious already has all of this stacked up somewhere, and literally it just unfolds. And I think that's the same for a lot of people who didn't really think that they could do anything with it, and nothing would ever happen. But in fact, it all seems to appear. And it's interesting that some maps try to bring in so many different ideas. Others are very, very simple. Like I love the one of Africa being lifted up by China and Seattle. A very, very simple image, but very powerful.
Right.
I think a final new thing is obviously the trust wheel that we've created. And I think that really, Dan, you've had me thinking about this for 25 years, and really what a tribe and what an indigenous person needs to know. They need to score high on every one of those elements of the knowledge, the hard decisions they need to make, the invisible leadership of being human and humanity, and the strength of their community. And it really, really seems to fit by total unintention, but probably natural human instinct. That is what it is. So thank you, Dan, for goading me in this direction.
Thanks to both of you for a terrific job. Lots more to talk about, and that will give us lots of hope for the future. But thanks for your contribution to the forum. This presentation, as you can all see, was a bit different.